Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my podcast partner, Bob Duff of HockeyDebates.com, and this is the HockeyDebates.com podcast, and we come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And, Bob, there's some breaking news here not long before we've come on this podcast, and that's Morgan Rielly out with a broken foot a couple of months. And, you know, for a team like the Maple Leafs that is already, I think, at a defensive disadvantage when they play most teams, the last loss of Rielly is huge.
Yeah, literally and figuratively breaking news, I guess you could say, with a broken foot.
Yeah.
And the last couple of games, too, the Leafs have kind of morphed back into the Mike Babcock Leafs, where they're giving up a pile of goals and look like they really don't know what they're doing defensively again. And giving up 8 last night to Florida, and then you lose your number one defenseman to a broken foot. I mean, Toronto goes to panic pretty quickly in the Leaf land, and they're either winning the cup or they're an absolute disaster. And I'm guessing today that the fan base is leaning toward absolute disaster.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you don't have success in the postseason without playing a defensive style. And I think everyone thought that Sheldon Keefe would get more out of the team defensively in terms of a buy-in than Mike Babcock did because, you know, they seem to really want to please Keefe. You know, he seems to be a guy that everyone wants to have success. And I think this is a major loss for him. And now I think the pressure is on the new Leafs coach. I think, you know, he's got to show that he can get more out of this this defensive group than Babcock was able to. And, you know, there are situations where the personnel isn't good enough. But when I look at the Maple Leafs, maybe less so without Morgan Rielly, but I see a team that's certainly capable of playing better defense than they've showed. They just have to commit to it. I mean, it's it's not about talent. It's about committing to playing that role, which often isn't easy.
It's interesting because late last week, Ottawa was in to play the Red Wings, and one of the topics of discussion was Ron Hainsey, who the Leafs allowed to leave as a free agent, and he signed with Ottawa and has partnered with Shabbat there and really allowed Shabbat to kind of ramp up his offensive game because he knows Haynes is going to be there to take care of the business at the other end. And the way Jeff Blashill explained Haynes, he says that's 25 minutes a night where you know there's not going to be a bad decision made on the ice. And you wonder, should the Leafs, instead of it, I was puzzled about the Jason Spezza signing. I didn't really see why they thought they needed him. They certainly have enough goal scoring, and he's not a guy that's going to make you grittier in your bottom six. So I wonder, should they have spent that money on Hainsey to keep him around and have a solid, reliable defensive blue liner, not to mention a guy who's won a Stanley Cup?
Yeah, I mean, when you look back now and you wonder, I mean, because what you need, especially in the postseason, are guys that can play safe, and you need non-risk takers, or at least enough of them to offset the fact that you may have a player or two who's going to, you know, try to take a chance in the offensive zone. So, like, I don't know, does this open up the door to the possibility that the Leafs are going to have to try to bring in a defenseman at the trade deadline, maybe Martinez in Los Angeles? I don't know, even Mike Green in Detroit, a veteran guy. What's your thoughts on? I know their cap situation is tight, but this will give them a little cap flexibility because he'll go on long-term IR, him being obviously Morgan Rielly.
I don't know if Mike Green answers their needs. I mean, Mike Green's kind of what they already have on defense, guys that, you know, play more of an offensive style game. I think they need a guy that can, as you say, can stay home and play it safe and make the smart, simple play and not put them at risk in their own end. And, you know, those guys are a lot harder to find because teams that have them don't want to give them up because they're so few and far between.
Yeah. No, I get you. I think Martinez would be a good fit, though. I think he's the type of guy that could help in all facets of the game. To be honest with you, and you know he's been on a championship team. Like he's been around the block a little bit. He knows what needs to be done in the postseason. So anyway, we'll have to see how that plays out. And then the other news was not in hockey, but I wanted to talk about it nonetheless. When the Rob Manfred, the commissioner of the MLB, has suspended the general manager and the coach of the Houston Astros, and basically made the team forfeit the first and second round pick, I believe, the next 2 seasons. And then subsequent, the owner of that team fired both of those guys right after the suspensions were announced. And that is a incredibly hefty price to pay for stealing signs. And I guess my question, Bob, is if there was something that was equivalent in the NHL, would Gary Bettman have been as strong in the punishment?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you look at the history of, certainly the recent history of the NHL, punishment hasn't often fit the crime. It seems like they can certainly punish coaches more than they can players because they're not covered by the CBA agreement.
Right.
So even you look at John Tortorella went off on the media there recently, off on the officials to the media recently, and they did fine him quite a hefty amount and put him kind of on notice, almost like he almost has to put up a bounty that he won't misbehave again this year or they're going to fine him again. So he's still working though. And really, I don't know what the comparable would be in hockey to sign stealing in baseball. I don't know. Yeah, you see it in all sports now where the coaches hide their mouths when they're talking because they must think every team has a lip reader on staff.
Yeah.
It almost gets a little bit ridiculous at times, you think, when you see them hiding their mouths while they're talking and you think, but then, I don't know, the hockey.
Well, let me run this by you, Bob, to see if you think this is at least close. Let's go back in time to 1993, and supposedly, and I don't know that we will ever know the absolute true story, the Montreal Canadiens went in and measured Marty McSorley's stick in either the dead of night or when there was nobody around in the dressing room, and then used that information to get an important penalty, in the Stanley Cup final. And when that happened, I think people saw it as just gamesmanship, to do it. And what do we say in hockey all the time? You ain't cheating, you ain't trying. Like, how many times have you heard that in the times you've covered the league?
Well, when I first started covering the league in the early 80s, a few of us used to head down, it was the old Maple Leaf Gardens, where I'm sure you covered a lot of games. It was pretty nightmarish to get down from the press box to dressing room level after a game. So you'd often leave if the game was decided and you knew there wasn't a chance of a late goal changing your story. You'd head down with a minute or two left in the game and try to beat the crowds down to the dressing room area. And you'd stand in the hallway next to the Leaf dressing room and you'd watch the players come back to the stick rack, which was in the hallway, and all be changing their sticks at the late point in the game. And they all had one marked with an X that they knew they'd measured and was legal. So everybody pretty much uses an illegal stick, I think, and they just I don't know if that still goes on because we certainly don't get the access to the areas around the teams that we used to, but certainly in those days, every player was reticent that they needed to change their stick late in the game or they might get called. Yeah,
no, I don't know if that's equivalent, but that just occurred to me. But I just think in the sporting world, we've never seen anything quite like this. And, you're certainly right about coming down harder. In the NHL, we saw recently that a coach was fired for essentially, even though we've never really been told exactly what it was, we do know that he has gone into substance abuse, alcohol rehab. Montgomery, the coach of the Dallas Stars, and he lost his job essentially for conduct unbecoming. They didn't call it that, but he did not conduct himself the way that the team thought he should on the road. They got rid of him. Now, they couldn't have done that to a player. You're not allowed to do that. The CBA provides, protections. And I'm just as you pointed out, the same is true in baseball. Like, I think if a player had been involved in this somehow, and I don't know how he could because this was really a sophisticated, organized effort, by management. But suppose the player had been part of it, I don't think he could have received the same level of punishment, that these guys did.
Yeah, I mean, historically, even when the NHL has handed out life suspensions, which have basically been for two of them got it for gambling on games, and the other fellow got it for punching a referee. Those all eventually were rescinded. So, one, the guy who punched the referee after the 1927 Stanley Cup final was back playing hockey within a year. So, even in the olden days, as much as they tried to pretend they were tough, there always just seemed to be a different reverence around hockey as far as illegal activity. There was always, unless you did something horrific, you were gonna play again.
Yeah. Well, in baseball, they've had the Pete Rose situation, and his lifetime ban has continued to be a lifetime ban. Where I think so. I guess my point is baseball has always come down harsh on things they see as an affront to the traditions of baseball, and this is certainly that. Although, what's fascinating about this is, we all know that for years, individual players have tried to steal signs. The guy's on second base, he's looking in, he's trying to figure it out, and if there's any way he could notify the guy on bat when he had figured out, he would do that. And I don't think there would be any suspension for that. That seems to be an accepted part of it. That's why catchers, change their sign rotation when a guy's on second base. But this was just so organized, and the fact that they were kind of counting on it and got it, figured out a way to sort of implement it, for an extended period of time. I think that's why baseball thought it was so ugly and egregious. But let's move on back into the hockey world. Since we met last, a rather surprising move, and I'm going to say surprising because Ray Shero is pretty respected around the league, and he fired his coach not so long ago. It seems like, okay, now every GM gets a coach firing, and that he's allowed. But here it is, surprising. The ownership and Ray Shero sat down, and when it was done, when they were done talking, Ray Shero was out the door. He's no longer, I think that's what they announced, he's no longer general manager of the New Jersey Devils. And I just wonder whether it just was a case of, the fact that the way he handled the Hines situation, where I think he was pretty supportive till the very end, and the fact that the team just hasn't been as competitive as the ownership thought it should be after all the offseason changes. Ray Shero was very aggressive. He went out and got Simmons. He brought in Gusev. Obviously, the big trade for PK Subban. And in fact, the team took a step backward. But what's your read on what happened here? Were you caught off guard by that as well, Bob?
Completely. You figure if you're going to get rid of him, why wouldn't you get rid of him at the same time you got rid of the coach? And there's that old joke about how does a GM know when it's the right time to fire the coach? Well, before they figure out it's your fault. That's always the answer.
Yeah, for sure.
But it almost seems like there must have been some kind of philosophical difference. Maybe it has to do with who they were going to hire as the next coach. Maybe there was a disagreement between ownership and Shero over that, or maybe they wanted to make more player moves and he didn't want to. Maybe, who knows? It's, as you say, it caught us all by surprise, and they'd actually been playing better. They've had a couple of big wins recently. Just beat the Lightning on the weekend, and they're playing the Leafs tonight. So got a chance for another win with the situation in Toronto. So obviously it didn't have to do with wins and losses.
No, and he recently traded Taylor Hall, so maybe they didn't like the return on that. Maybe they expected more. I wonder, and I'll just float this out there because I have no inside knowledge on this, but is this a case of unreasonable expectations? I don't know about you, Bob, but when they made all those trades and brought in PK Subban, I never thought, wow, the New Jersey Devils have turned the corner. I just didn't feel that way. I thought it would be a struggle to make the playoffs. But
I didn't think they were going to win the cup either, but I thought they were a team that would certainly be in the argument for a playoff spot. I didn't think they'd be just an epic disaster like they've been. I mean, you figure they had Hall, who'd won a Hart Trophy. They had Heischer, who was getting better. I think most people thought Mackenzie Blackwood was going to be a decent goalie, and there was obviously some people looking at him as is he going to be like Jordan Binnington and kind of come in here and just pick up the ball and run with it and be a success right off the bat? And obviously that hasn't happened. So, and Soup, you bring in a Norris Trophy winner, you've got a Hart Trophy winner, you've got 2 first overall picks. I didn't think they were ready to win the Cup yet, but I certainly thought, they'd be in that, 10 to 12 range in the East. I didn't think they'd be looking at possibly getting the first overall pick again.
I heard you say this as it came out of your words, and it made me chuckle to myself, but that he'd be a Jordan Binghamton. Like, how did we get to that already? Like, the guy had one incredible season, and now, he's got to set a new standard for, young goalies coming up. Like in the past, we expected, young goalies to have some measure of struggle before they found their way. But you're right. Now with younger goalies and or with goalies who lack an NHL experience, we do expect them to come in and play at a high level. Well, I don't know that I thought that they were going to be this disastrous, but I certainly thought it wouldn't be easy to make the playoffs because I knew the Metropolitan was a tough division, and the problem is that everybody in that division, in theory, improved, and so they weren't improving in a vacuum. And I don't want to say that I'm disillusioned with Shero, but I'm a little. I wonder how good he's really going to be. I think he's going to be at least a good player, but I think when he was drafted, there was hope that he could be a very good to an exceptional player. And now I don't know whether we know that that's the case. Well, I guess we're going to have to let that play out. But, the next question for Ray Shero is how hireable is he now? He's got that success he had in Pittsburgh still on his resume. He has the great respect around the league and very well liked too. But, you're judged on what you did for me lately. And the New Jersey situation didn't go very well for Ray Shero. So do you see him as the head of the line next time there's a GM opening, or is he going to have to go in and dazzle them with a great interview?
These things usually follow trends. And, when young guys come in and have success that haven't had a past track record in the NHL. Like if Toronto does end up having a good season this year, and people are going to look at a guy like Kyle Dubas and say, here's a young guy who came in, and certainly we've talked about John Chayka a lot, another guy who came in with no previous experience as an NHL GM and has built a pretty good product in Arizona. So, it's like coaching. These things tend to follow trends. A couple of college coaches had success. So last year, a whole bunch of teams went out and hired college coaches, and now we seem to see the trend going back to bringing in the retread guy, almost a guy who's had Vigneault in Philly. We see John Hines getting a chance again right away in Nashville. So it seems like the trend's going now with coaches back to the guy with some NHL experience rather than the new blood. And so we'll see. I think it's gonna I guess it depends on who's doing the hiring. Do they want a guy that has a track record? Are they in a position where they're rebuilding and they're more willing to risk a new guy?
Bob, we had a bizarre situation between Zach Kassian and Matthew Tkachuk, and now I guess there's a hearing with Kassian, and it looks like he could face suspension on this. And a lot of people in social media are wondering whether or not or why Matthew Tkachuk shouldn't be suspended for this. What was your take? Explain to our viewers what exactly happened and what is your take on all this, and who is to blame and who should be punished for this?
In the Calgary-Edmonton game on the weekend, Tkachuk took a couple of good runs at Kassian, hit him behind the net both times. Not entirely from behind, but certainly on the blind side where he didn't see it coming. The second hit, especially, I thought the one that Kassian decided to retaliate by fighting him. I think that one, when you look at that, it was a charge to me. I mean, I don't know why Tkachuk didn't, at the minimum, get a 2-minute penalty. He came in hard. He seemed to leave his feet when he hit him and hit him up high. He snapped his neck back when he hit him. So I just don't know why Tkachuk gets away scot-free here. And it's a bizarre situation where the guy who takes the cheap shot goes away scot-free, and the guy who retaliates not with his stick but with his fist is now looking at suspension.
Isn't that the way it always happens in the playoffs, though? It's a guy who retaliates instead of the guy who initiates that gets it. And we see that all the time. But I don't disagree with you, Bob. When you look at that, I think it seemed to me to be a case of 1970s/1980s hockey when Tkachuk, well, understanding fully that you can get Zach Kassian kind of stirred up, went in with provocation to try to get Kassian to do something that he shouldn't, and he did. But that doesn't excuse Tkachuk for taking what many on social media that are in the game have said was a dirty hit. And I think you saw a few tweets as well from athletes, did you not?
Yeah, the one that really caught my eye, I mean, I saw Teemu Selanne say it was a cheap shot, but Scott Hartnell, who was a guy who played the game certainly in the gray areas between the rules of the sport and the rules of the street, was a guy who was emphatic that Tkachuk's hits were dirty, and he said he pointed to the one where in both instances really Kassian's engaged with another player in a battle for the puck, so he's not seeing Tkachuk coming. And Hartnell said, "I know that's a dirty hit. It was a dirty hit when I played," and he said it was a dirty hit when I did it, and he said I knew when I did it I was going to have to answer the bell. And I think that's, to me, where fighting belongs in hockey. I've never been a fan of the old days of the hired gun enforcers, kind of the choreographed fights. I always thought that was ridiculous. But to me, having played the game for most of my life, to where I see fighting belongs, hockey more than any other sport, you're in vulnerable positions like Kassian was in both those instances where you might not see the guy coming. And if a guy is going to do something cheap or dirty to you, he should be expected to answer the bell. And that's knowing that you're going to have to drop the gloves and fight has always been a deterrent, I think, in some cases to guys like that. And obviously not to every guy, or it would never happen. But still, I think the fact it needs to be there for that fact. I just think fighting is part of hockey. I know a lot of people disagree. I don't want to see mayhem. I don't want to see bench clearing brawls. But I think if someone goes beyond the bounds of the rules and does something dirty, they should have to answer for it.
As the great Mel Brooks would say, Bob, it's good to be the king. If you were the king, who would you suspend and who wouldn't you suspend, and how much would you give them out of what happened?
I wouldn't suspend anybody. I don't think Kassian did anything that any player wouldn't have done if they'd have been cheap-shotted like that. I think he just responded as he has his whole NHL career, and as you say, he is a guy that does play a tough brand of hockey and can be goaded into penalties. But I think Tkachuk should have got a penalty. I think Kassian should have got a penalty on the play, and that should have been the end of it.
Yeah. Well, it isn't surprising that a man named Tkachuk would be involved in this as well. It's certainly something Keith could have been involved in years ago as well, having covered him for so long. Let's move on. You sent me a little note about Jágr now, of course, playing in 5 different decades, which matches Gordie Howe. And there's a great trivia that I've forgotten now, but I know you'll know the answer to this, Bob. That you can connect Gordie Howe all the way to players who played in the 21st century and going back to the 20s, because he played against somebody in the 40s who had played in the 20s. Who was it?
Dick Clapper.
Dick Clapper. Okay. So basically, Gordie played against players who played everywhere from the 1920s to post-2000, which is incredible as well. But Gordie actually played in, obviously, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 80s, right, as well. And now Jágr, 5th decade. What's that say about Jágr?
Well, you can certainly connect him back to the 70s because we know he played against Ray Bourque, and
right.
Started in 1979. So you say it's good to be king, it's good to be owner too. Jágr owns Kladno, the team he plays for now, so he doesn't have to worry about getting cut from the team. Although to his credit, he sat out 12 games with an injury because he said, I could have played, but I wouldn't have been helpful to the team, so I didn't put myself in the lineup. So I think, the guy still, he may be the owner of the team, but he's still playing an honest game. And obviously loves the game with a passion, and you've had a lot of chances to talk to him over the years, so have I. Even his last couple of years in the NHL, you could just see how much he loved the game, and I think you have to. It's the same with Chris Chelios. The guy just loved to play the game of hockey, and that's what keeps him around so long and keeps them committed to being able to play it at a decent level so they're not an embarrassment on the ice.
Yeah, that's one story I regretted I never got around to doing. I always wanted to go and meet with him when he did his middle of the night workouts, the 2:30 to 3:30 weightlifting sessions, which he was known for. I just thought it would be fun to go in and see what this guy does in the middle of the night, because they were legendary. A lot of teammates talked about it. He would try to get others to join him, and they'd all say, "You're nuts." I'm not lifting weights at a time when I'd rather be sleeping. But that was Jagr. He had a lot of passion, and he's one of those guys that I think, as each season went by, loved the game even more. And when he got old, he was very sentimental about the sport, and I'm sure he still is today. He's a guy that just didn't want to give it up, and still hasn't, obviously. So being an owner and everything else. Then Bob, our final subject. Let's talk a little bit about the Columbus Blue Jackets, the team that refuses to go away, and now. We've got a man named Elvis that's kind of stepping up and being an important player for them. Merzlikins, who was their European goalie, who came over. People said he was the best goalie, not in the NHL. Came out of the gate, struggled. I think they were kind of worried that maybe he wasn't going to be able to handle this. And lo and behold, they lose their number one goalie, Korpisalo, and then boom, he stepped in and he looks like $1 million.
And gave both of us being writers the kind of dream story you want to have fall in your lap the other night when he posted the shutout in, of all places, Las Vegas. Our good friend Brian Hedger, who covers the Blue Jackets, pointed out was the first live appearance Elvis has made in Vegas since 1976.
That's awesome. That's a good lead. Yeah. And Elvis sightings in Vegas are not that rare, to be honest.
No.
There's always Elvis in Vegas. But anyway, I'm kind of rooting for this team. I'm just going to be totally honest. I loved their fortitude last season when they pulled out all the stops and said, we're going for it. The fans deserve it. We're going to give it a run. Then pulled off a great first round upset. Now, it didn't work out because Matt Duchene didn't stay. They couldn't keep their players that they wanted to keep. But this year they're back at it, and I say this. I say this is John Tortorella's all-time favorite team. I just a feeling that I have. I think he loves coaching this group. I think they appreciate him, and he gets a lot out of them. He really does. They work for him. They're hard to play against. They got enough of everything to be able to play against anyone. They're not quite as formidable as the top contenders, but they work hard enough to present the possibility that they could make an extended run if, and this is a big if, because that Metropolitan is tough, if they can get in the playoffs. They're going to make it, Bob.
Yeah, and you talk about who they lost. I mean, Duchene didn't stay. Panarin and Bobrovsky both left. You lost your leading scorer and your two-time Vezina-winning goalie. And then this year, just recently even, they've just been crushed by injury. They've lost Cam Atkinson. They've lost Josh Anderson. They lost Korpisalo, their number one goalie. They got about 5 or 6 elite guys part of their core out of the lineup right now. And they've only lost 2 games in regulation. Their last 17. So, I mean, how could you not root for them? I mean, they're just doing it against all odds, and they've really become the best story in the NHL that probably nobody's talking about.
Yeah, no, like I said, they're kind of built for the playoffs. Reminds me years ago in the 1990s when the Devils would be floating around down in the middle of the pack, and I would write something, and then I'd laugh to myself about if the Devils could get in the playoffs, I would write they could win it all. And I don't know that I quite feel the same with the Blue Jackets. I'm not sure they can win it all. But if they could get in the playoffs, they could be dangerous just because of the style they play and what Tortorella can do to inspire them and to get them going. They're certainly not a team that I think is among the top teams in the league, but they could be dangerous if they get in the playoffs. Anyway, you've been listening to the Hockey Debates podcast. We come to you twice a week. That means we'll be back later in the week on Thursday when we have our betting show. I'm Kevin Allen. He's Bob Duff. Thanks for joining us on the HockeyDebates.com podcast.
Everybody have a great day. Thanks a lot.